Hi, I'm Mike Beliveau, and today we're going to take a return to the golden age of TV westerns, and I'd like to do a deep dive into the guns used by the Cartwright family on the classic TV western Bonanza. Bonanza ran on the NBC TV network here in America from 1959 to 1973. And that 440 episode run for 14 years made it the second longest running TV western ever. Only topped by Gunsmoke, which went on for 20 seasons. There was a time when I probably wouldn't have had to explain anything about Bonanza to the audience, but since a lot of you were probably not born and maybe have never seen it, I'll just briefly recap you. Bonanza was, of course, a western. It was set in Nevada, outside Virginia City, Nevada, and it was unique in a couple of ways. One, it was sighted originally in 1859, soon after the Comstock lode of silver was discovered. So it's a fairly early show. You know, most of the shows were set in the 1870s, 1880s. And its early date has some significance to the weapons that are going to be used during the first season. The second thing about the show that made it different, most of the Western series at the time had for their protagonist the lone gunman, the knight errant of the plains, if you will, who traveled across the West, righting wrongs, saving damsels in distress, very Knights of the Round Table sort of stuff, right? And that was something that the producers of Bonanza wanted to avoid. They wanted a different kind of Western. They wanted a Western that was rooted. So Bonanza has a sense of place and a sense of family. It's about the Cartwright family and their massive 1,000 square mile ranch, which is a ranching and timber and mining operation called the Ponderosa on the shores of Lake Tahoe. So rather than traveling around righting the wrongs of the West, the Cartwright clan, particularly in the first season, spent their time protecting the Ponderosa from the evil men who tried to take it from them. In a way, it was very Shakespearean, almost medieval in its character, that they had this massive estate and the Cartwright family had to defend it at all costs. And the first season, which is my favorite, was much more realistic and gritty than the 13 seasons that came after, which mostly focused on social issues and on the interactions of the Cartwright sons. So there was plenty of that in the first season, too. But it was a softer, kinder, gentler Bonanza after the first season. And I think to the detriment of the show, but I'm in a minority because they almost canceled the show in the first season. And they retooled it to the kinder, softer Bonanza, and it was a huge success, obviously. So what do I know? One of the other interesting facts about Bonanza before I get to the guns, and for those of you who think I take too long to get to the guns, you have a fast forward control. Just skip ahead till you see a gun, then you'll have it, right? The other interesting thing about the Bonanza is it was filmed in full color right from the start in 1959. One of the first shows to film in color. And in fact, people think that because RCA, who made most of the color sets in America at the time, had a big financial stake in NBC, that they dictated that Bonanza would be in color because they needed to sell color TVs, which were not selling well at the time because they were very expensive. And that's not true. The truth is that the producer of Bonanza, David Dortort, insisted that it be filmed in color. And his reasoning was that the setting, the Ponderosa, was as important as the characterization. And the only way to communicate that, the beautiful location, basically, of the area surrounding Lake Reno, was to film in color. And he said, basically, don't do it in color, I don't do the show. And NBC relented on that. And they did. And, of course, the show was extremely expensive to produce because it was filmed in color, among other things. So those were Bonanza's claim to fame. Now, as I said, Bonanza was the story of the Cartwright family fighting to preserve their way of life on the Ponderosa Ranch. And the Cartwright family consisted of Ben Cartwright, the family patriarch, who was a former sea captain who went ashore in San Francisco to settle down, and had 3 wives. He was widowed 3 times. And each of the sons, Adam, Haas, and Little Joe Cartwright, were the product of a different mother. And after being widowed for 3 times, early in life, apparently he decided to preserve the lives of the rest of American womanhood and remain a bachelor and just raise his sons. So the gold rush made San Francisco, that area, an uncomfortable area for the Cartwrights to live. And they decided to go out to Nevada and carve themselves an empire out of the wilderness, which they did on the Ponderosa Ranch, as I said, 1,000 square acres, only to have a silver strike follow them there. So first it was a gold strike in San Francisco, and then a silver strike, the Comstock lode, in Virginia City, right next door to the Ponderosa, which of course meant that they were now a target for takeover for their valuable land, their timber, their mineral resources, by evil mine owners and speculators, that sort of thing, which fueled the plot, many of the plots of the first season. Now for the guns, I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the guns used in the first season. And the reason for that is because they are quite different. It's obvious that David Dortort was trying to have guns that at least looked appropriate to the 1859 time period. In point of fact, all the guns used were anachronistic, except Little Joe's, really. He did not use cap and ball revolvers, per se, which, of course, he should have been using for 1859. But, having said that, he used guns that gave the impression, or he tried to give the impression, that he was using guns earlier than the Colt Peacemaker. And, of course, the Peacemaker, the 1873 Colt Single Action Army, was ubiquitous in TV westerns at the time. So using a different gun, would brand the show as being from a different when, if you will. But as I said, the guns were still kind of anachronistic. Ben Cartwright, Pa Cartwright, in the first season used a model 1875 Remington single-action revolver. And it was a beautiful one, 7.5-inch barrel, black grips, lovely gun. And he used it to great effect, used it in some gunfights. I suppose they chose it because it didn't look like a Colt single-action army, even though it is wildly anachronistic to the year 1859. If you're used to Colts, Remingtons are familiar to shoot and different to shoot at the same time. Definitely a lot of fun. So Ben Cartwright, 1875 Remington was his main gun. In subsequent seasons, they didn't try to maintain the 1859 timeline anymore. They decided to go with single action armies just like everybody else on TV. And Ben then transitioned to a single action army, 7.5-inch barrel, black grips. Honestly, I don't know why he couldn't have just kept the 1875 Remington. If he was going to go with a single action army, the Remington was still appropriate. But anyway, that's the way they went. Now, so Adam, the oldest son, was played by Pernell Roberts. And his gun, I think, is about my favorite. He had an actual Colt Richards conversion of an 1860 Army revolver. 8-inch barrel, beautiful, sleek lines. And as I say, it's just a beautiful gun. Now, of course, the Richards conversion did not appear on the scene until 1871. So a Cartwright having it in 1859 would have required a time machine. But that didn't appear to bother the producers very much. It didn't look like a Colt single-action army. It was very distinctive. And as a kid, I thought that was just great, and I still do. I've kind of fell in love with conversions off of that. Well, after the first season, Adam gave up his Colt Richards cartridge conversion, and for the rest of his time on the show, he carried a Colt single-action Army revolver with a 5.5-inch barrel. The middle son, Hoss Cartwright, he carried a really stunning original Remington New Model Army revolver. And, of course, the New Model Army is better known to a lot of you as the 1858 Remington, though that is totally wrong. That's the patent date for the loading lever on it. The actual New Model Army was made in 1863, which still makes it pretty anachronistic for use on the Ponderosa in 1859. But it's a beautiful gun. It's got ivory or ivory look grips, 8-inch barrel. And the only difference between this and the classic Remington New Model Army is that this has been converted to fire blanks. Kind of like the Pale Rider gun with Clint Eastwood was converted to fire blanks. So, and that's just to make life easier for the armorer. I mean, a casual look you would not know. But it certainly appears to be a classic 1858 Remington. And it's a beautiful gun. Now, once again, in the second season and from then forward, Hoss used a Colt single-action Army, just like everybody else, with a 7.5-inch barrel and ivory or ivory look grips. So it's a shame to see that he abandoned his Remington New Model Army, but that's what happened. But the first season, he used it a lot. We get to see it numerous times, and it is one classy six-gun. And Hoss was the most beloved character on the series. His untimely death from complications during routine gallbladder surgery is really what brought an end to the show. And it's just a shame. Now, Little Joe was played by Michael Landon. And, of course, he went on to quite a long career in television after this. But Little Joe's gun was a Colt 1851 Navy revolver. And originally it had stag grips, or stag look grips, but I think they actually were genuine stag grips. Later in the first season, they had ivory or ivory look grips. And that may simply be because the other grips got broken during the course of the season. I mean, that happened a lot. His gun is an original Colt Navy that had been converted, no doubt by Stembridge gun rentals, to fire blanks. So it's a cartridge firing gun, not a cap and ball gun. And you can see clearly how he has to remove the barrel to reload it, just like we would today with, say, a Howell's conversion, Howell's Arms conversion, right? He's got to take the barrel off and take the cylinder off to load it. And you can see in this episode where they meet Mark Twain in Virginia City that he's doing that during a gunfight, which is actually pretty cool.
Hey, Josh, I sure am anxious to read that story. Hey, don't stop writing. Come on, finish it.
For Pete's sake, Sam, finish the story.
And Little Joe uses his weapon quite a bit. He's rather impetuous with it.
Aim, fires.
After the first season, Little Joe gave up his 1851 Navy and used a standard Colt Peacemaker with a 4 3/4 inch barrel and ivory look grips. This is it right here. So, once again, they joined the ranks of the lowest common denominator for cowboy guns. But during that first season, they did have some interesting stuff. Now, there are some other guns used during the series. And guns used often by the Cartwrights, but also by other characters, are Henry rifles. And these would not be appropriate to 1859, but it's so close. 1860s when they first came out. And all of the characters carry a Henry at some time. Haas seems to have it more often than anyone else. And when they are just displaying the rifle, it is a genuine Henry rifle, and we get to see it quite a bit. And this is not that unusual. There are other shows that use Henrys and did the same thing. If you watch carefully, you'll see the magazine follower move each time I cock it. So this is an actual antique Henry rifle in .44 rimfire, and therein lies the rub, because .44 rimfire blanks are impossible to come by, and they're pretty darn hard to manufacture. So the Henry appears in non-shooting scenes, but when the shooting happens, they're using what I like to call Hollywood Henrys. And these are lever-action rifles with the wood forestock removed to expose the tubular magazine and make them look like actual Henry rifles. And they don't look that much like actual Henry rifles, but they do the best they can. In many cases, these were just Winchester 92s with the forestocks removed, and sometimes with the receivers plated in brass or painted brass-like. To give them more of a Henry look, but I'll tell you, it's not hard to spot the Hollywood Henrys from the real Henrys. But when there's shooting going on, They needed a gun that would shoot, 5-in-1 blanks. And the real Henrys weren't doing that, so Hollywood Henrys were the answer. The other interesting gun of note that we'll see on Bonanza is a gun that I call a Kerington. And that's a gun that started off as a Colt single-action Army revolver with a 7.5-inch barrel. But the Stembridge guys wanted to make them look like Remington New Model Armies. So they cast an underweb that would look like the loading lever and rammer of an actual Remington New Model Army. And they cast a hook on it so they could sling it over the ejector assembly and kind of screw it up into the ejector assembly to hold it on. And that gave the front of the gun the silhouette, to the casual observer, of a Remington New Model Army. But the back end was pure Colt. So they could load 5-in-1 blanks and basically do everything that they would do with an actual Colt single-action Army revolver. These Keringtons turn up quite a bit. They were a popular fake, but there are quite a few of those Keringtons that pop up here and there, and perhaps the most famous one was used by the character Manolito Montoya in The High Chaparral, because that one gets a lot of screen time. And when I do the Guns of the High Chaparral, you'll be seeing that quite a bit. So Keringtons were a big thing. A lot of bad guys used them on Bonanza, and we see the guns repeatedly. So those are the guns of the TV series Bonanza. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. Like it, comment on it, share it with your friends, spread the love around, play with the algorithm a little bit. And I'll see you guys next time. Till then, bye.